Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of Monday, March 24th. We have a quorum. I want to call the meeting to order. We have, the first item is approval of regular meeting minutes of February 10th, 2014.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Our first item is P1, Ordinance 36014, granting a special use for commercial indoor recreation and a drive-through facility, Little Beans Cafe at 430 Asbury Avenue.
Move approval.
Okay, Alderman Rainey, you've got your light on.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. For all those who do not know, this is the infamous corner of Oakton and Asbury. Been vacant for years, ever since CVS purchased the lease from Osco, or purchased Osco Drugs and received a sublease from Osco Drugs. We've worked tirelessly. People have said to us, Colleen and myself, for years now, did you ever think of having a Trader Joe's there? Did you ever think of having a this there? Did you ever think of having a Chuck E. Cheese? We have thought of everything, and we have worked on a weekly basis to get somebody there, as has our staff. They've been diligent. Out of nowhere came Little Beans. The woman who owns Little Beans drove by Asbury and Oakton every day for about a month after she realized it was vacant, and called the city one day and said, do you know anything about that building at Asbury and Oakton? And from then on, it's been just a beautiful thing. And they are asking for suspension of the rules, and given the beauty of this use, I hope that everybody will support a suspension of the rules, and we'll get these people underway. They've been to Zoning Board of Appeals, and they've met all the criteria, and we're really thrilled.
All right. I do have one person who has signed up to speak on this P1 item. That's Betty Esther. Not here? Okay. Here she comes.
Hi, my name is Betty Esther, and I stay at 2031 Church Street, zip code 60201. I'm speaking tonight to ask a question for my granddaughter, and was really happy she took the time to look at the city council to see what they was doing. And so she saw that, and she wanted to know what kind of indoor recreation they gonna put near Oakton School that they couldn't put there before. And I told her, well, I really don't know, because they're going to have coffee, maybe it's a workout place. So if someone, if the person here that is going to open that facility, I would love to talk to them and for them to send us some specs so we can tell her and all of her friends that in the neighborhood, what kind of recreation place is this? Is this for an adult or is it for children?
It's for children, Ms. Esther, and Alderman Rainey has turned on her light again. I'm sure she'll be able to give you a description of it. Alderman Rainey?
Okay. It is a cafe and a children's recreation space. There will be absolutely no recreation there for adults. You do not have to have children to utilize the cafe. There will be a drive-through coffee service where you can get coffee like you can get it at Starbucks. It'll be mostly cold sandwiches and pastries and, small plate type food. And the recreation will be segmented for various, like quiet play, reading play, et cetera. There will be a charge for anybody coming, and unlike the facility they have in Chicago, and if you Google Little Beans Cafe, you will see the full operation of the current facility they've had for several years. This will have an addition, because it's 14,000 square feet, an additional service for big beans. In other words, children up to age 12 will be accommodated. And there will be, I think it's going to be a half-court basketball court. I'm not sure. I don't believe it's going to be a full court. It's going to be half court for those children. And, like large motor skills, small motor skills, things like that.
Okay, so it's basically geared towards children up to age 12?
12, yes.
Okay. Then I will tell her teenage friends, that's not a place for them.
No, it's not. But we're working on something for teenagers, just so you know.
Okay, is there any other discussion? The motion's been moved and seconded, and also we have a request to suspend the rules this evening. So let's move in second for introduction, and all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, congratulations, Alderman Rainey.
Oh, I had nothing to do with it. The one thing we do want people to know, though, is while we had nothing to do with attracting this user, the fact that the place was empty was what we did, because there were numerous bad users, not bad users, bad uses that came forward, and we did manage not to, CVS managed not to lease to them, so that was the only
A
thing.
very good thing.
But we're thrilled.
All right, so that'll be moving on to the council. The next item is P2. This is Chicago, Maine, 835 Chicago Avenue. This is ordinance 32014, plan development for 835 Chicago Avenue. Do we have a motion first? All right, so it's been moved in second, and I believe the developer has a presentation for us. And I have a number of people who have signed up to speak on this issue as well. Yeah, right.
I apologize. Good evening. My name is Patrick Thompson. I'm the lawyer representing the applicant. And with me today is John O'Donnell, Jeff Clark from O'Donnell Investment Company, Don Copper and Ryan Vondrail from GREC Architects, Louis Abuna from KLOA, who is our traffic consultant, as well as Scott Bernstein from the Center for Neighborhood Technology, and Richard Aronson from Atlantic Realty Partners, who will be the property manager. Just a brief background on the entitlement process. We've been through a community meeting. Alderman Nguyen had hosted a community meeting. We've also been to a number of Spark meetings in December and January, as well as a Plan Commission hearing that we had on February 12th, which was continued to the 26th of February, at which time the Plan Commission approved the project. At this time, I would ask that the transcript from the Plan Commission hearing of February 12th, as continued to February 26th, be incorporated into the record of today's proceeding.
Yes, we already have it as part of our packet.
Thank you. And finally, I would like to thank the City of Evanston and the staff, Mark Munzer and Melissa Klotz, for their work in working closely with the city officials, the traffic engineer, as well as members of the Plan Commission to present what we think is a fabulous project. And at this time, I would ask Don Copper, the architect, to briefly give a description of the project, and we'll try to be as brief as we can with our presentation.
That's fine, thank you. Turn the lights off.
Thank you, committee. Don Copper, I'm a principal with GREC Architects. We are the architects for the project. The site is located at the southeast corner of, I don't have a laser, but at the southeast corner of Chicago Avenue and Main Street, directly proximate to the Metra and CTA stops, which, in the project team's opinion, makes it prime location for a transit-oriented development project. which will be discussed a little bit later. Thank you.
Can we stop you for a second and get
Of
a
course.
staff person to turn off the lights?
Oh, great, great, thank you. This one also?
It's not working up here. No.
Okay.
There, thank you.
Okay, so this is the area plan, of course. A couple of photographs of the existing context. The site is a currently vacant site at the southeast corner, 30,500 square foot site, which is one of the triggers that causes us to apply for plan development for the project. So these are different views. I'm sure you're all familiar with the site. Looking north on Chicago Avenue, looking west on Main Street, south on Chicago Avenue, and diagonally across the street from the site. Further photographs of existing buildings in the immediate area. And this is a rendering of the project, 9 stories. We believe that it is an appropriately contemporary design, but with high-quality materials that relate to the existing buildings in the neighborhood, including brick masonry, as well as at the base, stone and terracotta materials. Lots of glass for visibility of the residents, as well as for the second floor, which is a incubator office space, and amenities for the tenants and residents of the building. Grade level will be primarily retail. The majority of our parking is below grade, one level below grade, with a number of zoning regulation spaces, as well as the opportunity to expand the parking count by way of tandem parking, as well as mechanical lift parking on the west side. This is an area and site plan which indicates that we're complying with the Chicago Avenue streetscape setback requirement, which we believe is a great thing to be complying with, because it actually widens the sidewalk in a way that allows us to provide new enhanced landscaping, as well as enhancement of the pedestrian experience along Chicago Avenue. On Main Street, the existing sidewalk is already, I believe, 14 feet wide. It's pretty considerable. We will be adding significant landscape to that side as well. We've worked very closely with city agencies on vehicular circulation on and within and around the building to minimize impact on local auto traffic, as well as local pedestrian circulation. Grade level plan, as I said earlier, along Main Street and most of Chicago Avenue at the corner is a retail lease space. Here is the entry lobby for the tenants and residents of the building. Parking on the south half, which is multi-use parking, which we will explain a little bit more in better detail later. Loading, 2 loading berths off of the alley. And once again, we've worked with the city agencies to minimize traffic impact by allowing only one-way, right turn only egress from the parking onto Chicago Avenue, as well as widening virtually widening the alley by setting our building back 10 feet on the alley side where the vehicular circulation occurs and loading occurs. We'll also be taking these existing power and communication lines that are overhead and power poles in the alley and relocating those underground at the developer's expense to provide neighborhood enhancement. The next slide indicates the level of landscaping that's anticipated along Chicago Avenue and Main Street. Particularly along Chicago Avenue, this is a significant enhancement on the east side of Chicago Avenue relative to what the existing conditions are from a landscaping perspective. This is an elevation that indicates the landscape concept with both shade trees as well as low perennial plantings in the planters along the sidewalk. This plan indicates the second level plan, which is where the incubator offices and the tenant amenities are, which are both directly adjacent to an outdoor amenity deck, which is created by setting back the east side of the building from Main Street, which was a deliberate move in order to reduce the street wall effect along Main Street. So the building is an L shape, loading this portion of the building to the south side and providing a landscaped amenity deck, which we intend to, when the planting is mature here, should be visible from Chicago Avenue as well. This is a typical residential level, which would be levels 3 through 9. Each has 16 units with a mixture of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 1 3-bedroom unit on each floor. A series of elevations indicating our proposed height relative to surrounding buildings. This is the west elevation looking from Chicago Avenue. Excuse me. Our proposed maximum height is 97 feet relative to the existing 105-foot 9-story building directly north of us across Main Street. East elevation, this is the elevation fronting the alley. We intend to continue the quality materials that we're using at the retail storefronts along Chicago Avenue and Main Street along the alley, so that it doesn't have that sort of typical back-of-house service look to it. The south elevation, which you actually wouldn't ever really see like this, but because this is the elevation that this portion here directly abuts the existing building to the south of us. And then finally the north elevation looking at Main Street with the intended treatment of glassy retail storefronts and canopies, lots of lighting, etc. Sorry? I'm sorry, I can't. Sure, of course. So this is the second level deck, which is at plus 20 feet above grade level. So probably actually just a little bit taller than the ceiling of this room.
Do you have an elevation of that, from that point of view, with the landscaping
Yes.
in it? Okay.
Yes, we're coming up on that
Okay.
in probably a slide or two. So these are a couple of views with the building stitched into existing photographs, just to show you how we see it as relating to the existing neighborhood. This view looking north on Chicago Avenue indicates that we'll be using the 4-foot Chicago Avenue streetscape setback to enhance the streetscape with a significant amount of landscape planting. And again, this is sort of the south elevation, so it's not that imposing since you can't see it directly. This is the view I believe you're asking about, Alderman, which is looking west on Main Street. And again, I'd like to reiterate that we deliberately configured the building from this perspective to set back the majority of the east-west portion of the building fairly significantly in order to not impose so much as a street wall on Main Street. This is also where the amenities deck will be, and we're showing kind of smallish trees, but eventually they will be mature and will be more significant. Meanwhile, we're also creating enhanced landscaping at the street level on Main Street as well.
While you're at that slide, could you detail a little bit more the corner of the building that's at the alley?
Yes, yes. We had a couple of community meetings wherein it was suggested to us to create a little bit of a setback here at the alley, at the corner of the building, to sort of mitigate any alley vehicular traffic conflicts with pedestrians on the sidewalk on Main Street. So what we've done is we're setting the building back 5 to 7 feet here with a glassy corner to try to enhance visibility, at least looking sort of between the alley and the portion of Main Street fronting our project.
We have a question from Alderman Fisk.
Thanks. Just a quick question. Are the trees growing in planters? Is that, they're concrete planters?
The street trees are...
The trees on the amenity deck?
Yes, they are in planters. They would be in probably precast planters. Usually those are 3 feet deep in order to accommodate tree balls.
What kind of trees are those?
I don't know if they've been specified or not, to be honest with you. We can get back to you on that. The next slide indicates what we envision the building to look like at night. Obviously, being predominantly glass, there will be some lighting visibility from residential units, but this slide, to me, is particularly salient in how we will be treating the grade level to not only have these large glassy retail storefronts, which will allow some visibility to the sidewalk, but also we will be supplementing this facade with lighting that will both provide will be both inviting and secure, we believe. The next slide summarizes the C1A plan development allowances that we're applying for. You'll see that in most cases we are not applying for the maximum allowable. We're looking for 112 dwelling units versus the allowable 122, FAR of 4.86 versus the PD allowable of 5.5. We are asking for full consideration on the maximum height allowable in the PD allowance, and we are asking for the 15-foot allowance with respect to our setback for enclosed parking. And the parking will not be in any way visible from any of the local sidewalks. This is a summary of parking that is proposed to be provided by use, and some of our consultants will speak a little bit more in a few moments with respect to shared parking use, which we're indicating at this line here. And then finally, the zoning required, because of the number of uses that we have in the building, regardless of the size of those uses, by the zoning ordinance, we're required 5 loading berths, 10 feet by 35 feet deep. We're proposing to provide 2 loading berths, which we think would be more than enough to meet the demand of excuse me, the size of these uses, because none of our uses are actually that large, except with the possible exception of residential, which would have the least demand for loading. And I'd like to also point out specifically that in addition to these 2 loading berths, we have a dedicated berth for waste pickup. So we're not using one of these 2 berths for waste pickup. And with respect to the depth, we're proposing to provide 25-foot deep berths within the building itself, but as you recall, we're setting back the building 10 feet from the property line along the alley. So technically we can accommodate the required 35-foot deep berth, but because of the setback, excuse me, we're proposing that 25 feet of that depth is enclosed. So I'd like to turn it over to Louis Obuna of KLOA, traffic consultant.
Don. Don? This is advanced?
Yeah, that's advanced, and then that's the...
All right. Good evening, Louie Abuna, A-B-O-O-N-A. I'm a traffic engineer principal with KLOA. I'll speak briefly about the traffic study that we conducted as part of this development. We worked very closely with your engineering staff, with your traffic engineer, to develop an access plan that is workable for the project, as well as minimize the impact on the street system. What you see here is, and Don touched on this, is the access that we're proposing to serve the development on Chicago Avenue. Working with the city staff, we determined that a ride-out only would be the best solution for this location in terms of minimizing the impact on Chicago Avenue, the traffic, as well as pedestrian, particularly given the proximity to the signal at Chicago and Main Street. So coming out of Chicago will be a ride-out only under stop sign control. Will be signed, no left turns out. There'll be a sign facing Chicago Avenue, do not enter, for vehicles not to enter from Chicago. And also be striping, and the driver would be also designed to force people to make right-hand turn out onto the street. The rest of the access will be off the alley, both for the garage access as well as for the loading docks. As Don indicated, the building will be set back so that additional 10 feet to provide that additional area for the truck maneuvers as well as for vehicular maneuvers. The building at the corner will also be set back to improve the sight lines as vehicles are exiting the alley onto Main Street. So as part of our traffic study, we looked at the traffic in the area. We looked at the traffic at the intersection of Chicago and Main, Chicago and Kedzie. We also looked at the traffic on the alley. We actually did traffic counts to see how much traffic is using the alley. And I'll just briefly go over the conclusions of the traffic study. The first conclusion is this development being a transit-oriented development in a very close proximity to two major train stations, to the bus lines, also to downtown Evanston. A lot of its traffic will be reduced during the peak hours as more people will be seeking other alternatives of transportation using the trains and buses. So because of that, the impact will be also reduced from the amount of traffic that would be generated, and as such will not have a significant impact to the roadway system. All the intersections are projected to continue to operate at acceptable level of service. One thing we're going to be doing that I did not point out on the previous aerial is that we are eliminating the 4 parking spaces along Chicago Avenue here in order to provide a northbound right turn lane similar to what exists in the other direction. So this will mirror what's happening on the north side and will improve the flow of traffic, reduce some of the queuing that occurs, and allow these people to turn right onto Main Street more efficiently. Alley will be able to accommodate the limited amount of new traffic that will be generated from the development, both vehicular traffic as well as truck traffic. And as I said, we did counts on the alley, and the amount of traffic that uses the alley currently is not significant. In fact, it averages to about 1 car every 2 minutes. The alley access will reduce traffic on Chicago Avenue and pedestrian conflict, as I indicated earlier. The outbound traffic from onto Chicago Avenue will be right turns only, again to minimize the impact on pedestrians and vehicular traffic. And then the removal of the 4 parking spaces will allow for that right turn lane and help the flow of traffic on Chicago. With that, I conclude my presentation and turn it over to Scott. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Scott Bernstein. I'm president of the Center for Neighborhood Technology in Chicago, and I'm also a resident of 917 Elmwood, near Main in Chicago, a couple of blocks west of the development. And we have some expertise in measuring the effectiveness of transit-oriented development, not only around the region, but around the country. And I wanted to share some of our observations about this space. I also wanted to state for the record we weren't paid for this testimony. We're offering to share this knowledge in the public interest, and be happy to answer any other questions in that regard. And I hope I have the right device here, so we'll find out. Yes. So the national trend in transit-oriented development is being driven by the national trends in driving, which in turn are being driven by trends in the changing demographics of the population. We're seeing a slow shrinking in the number of people living per household. We're seeing a drop in the demand for ownership housing, an increase in rental housing. This is resulting in fewer people per household, fewer cars per household, fewer vehicle miles traveled per household per year, and hundreds of jurisdictions across the country have responded by, in effect, downzoning their minimum parking requirements, typically by 25 to 50%, although I'll note in San Francisco, you can now build a building without parking by right and apply to put some spaces back in if you want to. In Portland, there's 13 buildings that have been built without parking, and here in Chicago at Division, Ashland, and Milwaukee, a 99-unit building was successfully built and leased up without parking, which we believe was further enhanced by the presence of both the CTA and car sharing, similar to the development proposed here. Chicago and Maine is one of the very few locations where both the CTA and Metra come together. Evanston's fortunate in having its own train line, and two of those stops have that sort of shared commuter and rapid transit service, plus the associated PACE bus routes, the Northwestern Shuttle, and the bike lane. We actually measured current car ownership around the main station, and within a half mile of the two stations, households own an average of 1.28 vehicles. Within a quarter of a mile, that number drops to 1.17. Within that quarter of a mile, there's 861 renters, and 25% of them have no car at all. 70% of the half-mile area's households have only 0 or 1 vehicle. Within a quarter of a mile, owners have 1.8 cars per household, and renters have less than 0.93 vehicles per household. From 2000 to 2009, the percentage of commuters who walk, bike, or take transit to work increased from 30 to 33%, or 10%. And I'll note citywide, just for context, that Evanston's unique among suburbs and that over half of all commuters do not drive alone to work. That is, if you add together the number who carpool, take transit, walk, work at home, or bike, you already are seeing the effects of the trends that I talked about. And
Excuse me, may I interrupt you to ask what the source of all of your data is?
Sure. Car ownership is measured, and commuting mode are measured in the annual American Community Survey of the census. We can take that down to the black group with the most recent release, which covers the 2008 to 2012 level down to the census block group level. And these numbers come very close to vehicle registration data when we're allowed to sample that from time to time from the state of Illinois, plus or minus. Unfortunately, not everybody registers a car, but this is how people answer the question. Yeah. Sure. And so from 2000 to 2012, the number of zero-car households in Evanston jumped from 946 to 3,400, even though total households declined by 2,000. And this trend is anticipated to continue both for the younger generation and for people of my age. I'm 62, in full disclosure, and I can't get over the habit of aging, and people who are older are driving less as well. And the cost of driving is going up, and so we expect these trends to be reinforced. Finally, I wanted to make a comment about car sharing and shared parking. We operated for 10 years the IGO car sharing service and sold it last year to Enterprise Holdings. And we found that every car that we put out there was used on average by 37 households. And when you looked at the number who were selling a car within a year of joining, average in surveys taken every year over a 4-year period, roughly half of our members were selling a car, we found, within a year of ownership. So when you did the averages on it, we found that every IGO car put out there was taking 17 cars off the road. And by the way, this was irrespective of the income of the community. We just sort of found this universally. Zipcar did a similar survey on their service, and they found they were taking 15 cars off the road. What we also found was that associated with car sharing was a change in behavior. People would make a rational decision to use the CTA or Metra or carpooling for their journey to work, and they would, which is 1 trip out of 5 taken at Evanston, by the way, and the other 4 trips out of 5 are taken for going to school or shopping or eating or medical services or visiting a friend or going to and from a house of worship. So they use the car sharing for those short distance trips, and they end up saving 10 to 15% on the cost of living as a result, which is an important reinforcement. They increase their walking, they increase their biking, they find ways, they even increase their sharing of shared cars. They start sharing the cost with a neighbor. So if there's fewer cars out there because of car sharing services and fewer cars out there for the longer distance journey to work because of commuting, this is what results in a lower demand for parking overall, and it's even better for renters, the data shows, than for owners. If I can just put this in context to wrap it up, I think that I'm making these comments in a broader community context. Evanston, as I said, is very fortunate to have a legacy transit system, to have an urban design that supports walking, to allow for mixed-use development, and all these things reinforce each other. So if the opportunity comes up to reduce an inefficient use of land in favor of an efficient one and to provide more transportation options for the surrounding neighbor every time one of these parking zoning decisions are made, we see that as providing a net community benefit. And as I said, we'd be happy to offer those perspectives on a continuing basis to the city, and be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderman Grover?
If I may, Mr. Bernstein, while you're here, you're making the point that the proposed building, this planned development, is in some ways responding to the transit-oriented development trends, which is a lower demand for cars.
Correct.
But in some sense, too, because it's taking the public and it's taking folks a little longer to get used to the idea of downzoning for parking, to some extent, perhaps these buildings, the TOD buildings, can themselves both promote and support the idea of transit-oriented development. That is, I'm looking for this building to ramp up amenities that would serve residents who are so that they do indeed self-select for this building and aren't looking to acquire a car or looking to perhaps downsize their car acquisition. And are there ways in which this building can do that, besides the car sharing and providing bike infrastructure and those kind of amenities in the building? But can the building itself contribute to its own success as a transit-oriented development?
Sure. We see examples here and around the country of information resources that reinforce the message, that give local traffic reports, which are easy to get on demand right now. The CTA offers a service.
In the building.
Within the building,
Within the building.
yeah. We've seen buildings where my office is in Wicker Park that have taken the CTA up on the offer of a closed channel to share in the train tracking and bus tracking. So they turn, one coffee shop near us turns around an oversized LCD screen, and you get the view of when the next couple of buses are coming in each direction. Or if you go in, they'll allow you to play with that and get that information too. That's a very low-cost way of increasing access to real-time information that reinforces what you're talking about. We find buildings that let tenants know where there's available counseling services, specialists who can tell you how to use the trains effectively, how to schedule your time to make use of this, how to share a car, how to set up a carpool if you want to do it. Those services are available too. Unfortunately, government can't do everything. Government should encourage building owners to do that sort of thing. But where the services exist and they're very low cost like this, I think those kinds of reinforcements can help as well. The shared cars are a community amenity wherever they are. And the more of them that the developer provides, the more actual transportation choice will be available to the community.
A community amenity, not just a building amenity.
That's correct.
But what you're finding in these buildings is that the car shares are serving more than just the residents.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're available. You can get even more use out of that. There are these new apps, Spot Hero and Park Circa, that allow people to let other people know that their leased spaces are available for a relatively modest price, $2 to $4 for 12 hours of parking. It would be, I think, a smart move of the city to encourage those sorts of applications to be used. So the more reinforcements you can provide like that to people, the more likely it is that they will use them. I mean, we're experimenting with home economics down in the high school level. Again, people forget about it, but home ec got created originally to counsel people on how to lower the cost of living. Driver's ed teaches people how to buy a car in the name of financial responsibility, but it doesn't teach people how to avoid the unnecessary expense of driving if they need to pay attention to that too. That could be another one. So, I mean, I could go on about that, but those are things that I think you could reasonably expect a responsible building owner to want to engage in. And I think they'll find as the demand for those extra services, such as car sharing, increases, so will their willingness to support those services. You're very welcome. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Richard Aronson. I'm the co-founder and principal of Atlantic Realty Partners. We are going to be the operating partner for this project. We have over 10 years of experience here in Evanston, both developing and managing multifamily projects. We were responsible for the development of the Reserve just down the block here on Ridge. And a few years ago, we completed that was the redevelopment of the former Whole Foods site. And then a couple years ago, we completed the redevelopment of the Sienna condo final phases, which is 1717 Ridge. And we're delighted that the O'Donnell Company has selected us to participate with them on this site. And Alderman Grover, I appreciate your comment because you led into a great segue into my presentation. So I'm going to share with you tonight the benefit of our experience here in the city as it relates to the specific marketing and demographics and parking as it relates to what we're proposing. And Scott, thank you for your comments as well. One of the, Scott mentioned a lot of things, but most importantly, as it relates to building a resident profile that is oriented toward utilization of transit at a TOD project like this, is really the marketing and outreach that goes into attracting that consumer. We do a lot of that actually through marketing and publicity that's directed toward transit systems, be it CTA or Metra, or to various websites that are associated with commuting, in addition to using conventional channels of marketing and publicity for housing. Our business is indirectly a retail business. We are constantly marketing and selling our product. It's different than a for sale building where it's really a one-time process. So it's a continuous process for us. So it's obviously going to be a key differentiator. I don't think it's been mentioned yet, but this site happens to be one of the very few in the entire Chicagoland area that benefits from both a Metra and a CTA stop.
Yeah, we know it.
Yeah, okay. We now are stating the obvious, and so, but based on our experience, our demographic will continue to be the primary demographic of most of the newer multifamily projects that are in development in the Chicagoland area, which is younger singles, younger couples, and roommates. We typically find that on the single side, it's generally about a 50% ratio of cars. The couples and roommates typically have one car. We are finding in Evanston it's a great market for a dual income family, either roommates or a couple where one is commuting without a car and one is going to a job with a car. We have a number of smaller families, in many cases single parent. We typically find that consumer with one car. Empty nesters are a great and growing source of the consumer in our projects. They typically have one car. And then, although we'll have a smaller student proportion here than we would, say, on a site that was closer to campus, to the extent that we do have students, they're typically graduate students, they typically have a very low utilization of cars, somewhere around in a range of 20%. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be making promotions, offering incentives to attract and encourage transit utilization. We talked about bike storage. We talked about the provision of transit passes and the car sharing program. We'll actually be providing free membership in the car sharing program that we utilize. Let's talk a little bit about parking. There's been obviously a lot of emphasis on parking here, so we've taken the time to do a little bit of data collection as it relates to other multifamily buildings in the city. And in this, the key, if I could, not sure if I'm getting this thing to work. I get that. Oh, there we are. This one? There we go. Okay. So the utilization right here is the analysis and the data that we collected as it relates to how many parking spaces are actually being used in the existing building. So we have data. We're currently have a little over one car per unit being utilized. By the way, none of these buildings have near the transit accessibility. They're all reasonably transit accessible. None of them have the level of transit accessibility that the project we're talking about.
Central Street does. Central Station Apartments.
I'm sorry. Okay. Got it. Just as good. We have 0.85 at the Reserve. We have 1.01 at Amley, which is 2 blocks south of us.
I don't think that's fully leased yet.
This is based on actual units occupied and units parked. So it's based on the data for the existing utilization. So based on the 145 of the 195 units leased, they have leased 147 spaces. That's where the 1.01 comes from. And of course, this project is under construction. As far as the physics of how this is going to work, the lower level has approximately 76 what we call base single stalls. They will be available on a what we call permit basis, on an open parking basis. And then we'll have assigned parking in the dual spaces. The benefit of having this open permit parking here is it will allow us to use this space as our swing spaces for office users. Now we're going to have, we think, anywhere from 15 to 25 office space parking, and we'll be able to counter offset the users of these spaces that are at work with the office users that are in the building. So it's a perfect co-activity as it relates to as people leave the building gets backfilled with office parking. So in this particular case, we have the preponderance of both the residential and all of the office is addressed. On the main parking level, I shouldn't say on the main level, we have a dedicated 13 retail spaces, 2 car share spaces, and then we have what we call 15 additional retail/residential spaces. These will be similar to the office space over here during the day. These will be swing spaces that will be vacated during the day by people that are working. We also wanted to mention, of course, that we have a 50 bike room, and we have the ability to expand that as well, depending on use. It's important to note that because of the size of the property and the multiple uses, we will be able to keep a full-time staff that will be on property 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That allows us to manage the parking in a comprehensive way. It's not a situation where there's an issue, you make a phone call, and an hour later somebody shows up. We're there all the time, and that's because we have an ongoing marketing and leasing function and management function. I talked about the components that, I'm sorry, let me switch back. The components of the office use. I also wanted to mention that we'll be using an access control key system that will allow us to control access to the lower level, and then we'll have appropriate signage and other markings to indicate the other retail and shared parking areas. We talked about office as well, and we wanted to quickly mention the availability of the lift product that is going to be installed at one end of the parking garage on the lower level. And we've had a lot of interest in this. It has become much more commonplace, and I wanted to mention there's actually a building in the West Loop downtown that is being proposed that is 100% hydraulic and actuated parking on 3 different levels. So I think what we're seeing is a trend toward that, and we're confident and comfortable with that particular product. I'd like to introduce Mr. O'Donnell now to provide you with some wrap-up.
I'm John O'Donnell. I'm part of the sponsorship group. I just want to briefly summarize, and I'll be very brief about this and kind of restate some of the things that have been said. But first, you know, this is really an extraordinary site and an extraordinary opportunity, and we're very pleased to have this opportunity to work with you. You know, Evanston itself is unique in that it's a North Shore community, but also has a pedestrian accessible feel to it and very urban in context. So it blends both of the things of a downtown neighborhood or Wrigleyville, along with the benefits of the North Shore. The transportation characteristics I think we spoke about, and everybody's aware of it. This is probably the best. It's certainly second to none in terms of the whole metropolitan area and in the state, in fact, in terms of an opportunity to develop a transportation-oriented development. It is unique, and it's an opportunity we don't want to miss. It's a highly prominent site, clearly. It's been vacant for quite a while because of the recession, and we've had the good fortune to work with city and staff for almost 4 years now to try to plan the very best building for this site, and that's our goal. We're creating a mixed-use development that provides a number of opportunities. Not only can it minimize parking from a transportation-oriented development, but there's a shared parking aspect to this that allows counter-cyclical parking uses to minimize both traffic congestion as well as parking needs. We've designed a building that we think is a very contemporary design, but using classical materials and contextual to the neighborhood. We stole some of the architecture from Midtown Manhattan. I mean, quite frankly, we saw this kind of design with the kind of corrugated glass front to be exceptional in condominiums in New York. We're putting in below-grade parking, and I think most of you know below-grade parking is much more expensive, but at the same time, much more aesthetically pleasing, and it works very well with this site. We're utilizing the transportation, as I said, but we're also hoping to enhance the pedestrian experience as has been described with landscape, hardscape, and obviously this ties into the Chicago Avenue plan, but to really create a pedestrian animation throughout the area. And LEED Silver designation, the building will be LEED Silver. You know, that's over and above the transportation attempt to minimize the carbon footprint and be environmentally sensitive. Richard just pointed out, what our demographic is, and I don't want to repeat that right away, but essentially what we're trying to do is create a building and go after a certain type of person that has congruent motivations with us. And we're looking at that as young professional couples, the type that are maybe in the city now. Many of them are giving up their cars, and what we want to do is make this something that they can do and make it a very useful experience for them. We're also seeking out empty nesters, and we did think those are the predominant market types. As Richard said, we're going to have a plan that subsidizes the use of public transportation. This is what they want. This is what we think will appeal to them. This will tie into the development plan that we have. And I also wanted to add that we did get some pushback at Planning Commission. We revised our plan. We felt that we had adequate parking at the time, but there was others that did not think so. We've added 23 spaces. We've elaborated quite a bit on our concept of the shared parking situation and talked specifically about how we would manage that process with both technology and people. We've minimized the curb cut on Chicago Avenue. This was, the staff was very much responsible for this. This was intended to minimize traffic and again, create the most friendly pedestrian pathways along Chicago Avenue. One of the things I wanted to mention that we applied with the city for a state grant for ultra-high-speed internet. This will benefit our property, clearly. It also benefits the city, and it benefits Northwestern University. We're co-applicants. But there's a minimum of 1,000 households. We're only 100, but 1,000 households in this area are going to get the benefit of this ultra-high-speed internet. We're discussing with staff quite a number of public benefits. I can elaborate on hardscape and landscape, setbacks, hardscape and landscape improvements that we've discussed already at the city sidewalks and curbs. We're discussing the hiring, and we've talked to our contractor about hiring Evanston residents to make sure that they're well represented. We're replacing 4 parking revenue. So we've talked about taking 4 parking spaces permanently to enhance the traffic flow on Chicago Avenue. We're paying the city essentially a perpetual payment for that up front. We're going to be using some of the parking spaces during construction. We'll pay for that as necessary during the construction cycle. And we're relocating. I think Don Copper mentioned that we're putting utilities below grade, eliminating traffic or utility poles. This will enhance alley traffic. And we've discussed contributing up to $50,000 to enhance the park that's intended to go across the street. And we also will comply with the Affordable Housing Fund in the event the project ever goes to condominium. And thank you very much for your kind consideration. Hopefully you'll look favorably upon this. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Fisk?
I just had a really quick question about the parking, the retail parking. Is that going to be metered in the building? No. So how do you keep tenants from parking in the retail parking, the reserved? And is the entrance where the 4 spaces on the street are being removed? Is that where the entrance to the retail parking is, or have I gotten it confused?
Well, actually, it's a turn lane that's being added is what's taking the
right. But where those parking spaces, where those 4 currently exist, is that where the entrance to the retail parking is going to be? It's not. Okay, then I've got it flipped. Mm-hmm.
I can back up if you want me to.
No, I think I've got it.
So it's primarily through signage and through monitoring. So we will have a signage that will have a maximum retail parking, be it 30 minutes or be it 60 minutes.
And how is that going to be enforced?
Well, typically we'll have staff there that can monitor it, and there's the. You can mark tires with chalk. You can put notes on cars. there's a number of ways of conventionally just monitoring it, and typically we don't like to boot, we don't like to tow, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. Typically, it's really just a process of making sure everybody understands that the policy is going to be enforced, and once we start enforcing the policy, it's sometimes some people are a little bit slow to catch on, but they're really forced to if it's well managed. And for it to be successful, it will be well managed.
What's your payment, your upfront payment, I believe Mr. O'Donnell referred to for the removal of the spaces? So,
I believe Mark Munzer.
Mark Munzer, Director of Community Development. It's being negotiated right now, Alderman. It presently stands at $72,000.
and that's a one-time payment?
Correct.
Okay. Had you thought about allowing the city to put parking meters in those spots? That would certainly keep those spots open without so much monitoring on your part.
You're saying putting parking meters within the building?
Yes, in the retail spaces.
It's something we have not considered. We typically try to have a program of signage and really just physical monitoring, but that's not to say we certainly couldn't take a look at it.
Right. The only reason
we wouldn't be opposed to.
Again, the only reason I'm suggesting is that it would be a way to keep the spaces clear to benefit the folks who are coming in as retail tenants.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey?
You know, of this entire project, this is the weakest piece of it, I think. You can't control it if you're not, law enforcement or a PEO, unless you call for towing or booting, have a private booting thing. You can't control that parking. And I think Alderman Fisk's idea is great. It would save the project $70-some thousand if they would just trade the spaces on Chicago Avenue for 4 meters. I think you should think about that. The issue with the 4 meters is anybody could use them,
Right.
not just the retail people. But that's what's going to happen with the other spaces that have no meters. Anybody's going to use them.
Good point. Yes, Mr. O'Donnell?
It's an idea that we hadn't thought of, and
Very smart.
Yeah, it sounds like it has a lot of. I'd like to consider it, though.
Sure.
I want to figure out what the drawbacks are, but it does sound like it has a lot of merit.
Well, there's drawbacks for us because we have to go in there and collect the money.
We can always.
And enforce it. Huh?
Right. But we can put our new meters in.
Yeah, we could, yeah.
Yeah.
The credit card, it's
Yeah.
a great idea.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I also have a number of citizens who've signed up to speak. And let's see. Cindy, would you mind? Yeah, put the lights back on for us. The first person is Nikki Hiltwine.
Hi, I'm Nikki Hiltwine. I live at 820 Hinman. I share the alley with 835 Chicago. I'm down about half a block. I have to say their presentation has changed since the Plan Commission meeting. Some numbers have changed and things I wanted to talk about. My little speech I wrote, because I'm not good at ad-libbing, I would like to reconsider, and I wondered if I would have a chance to come back and address those issues at another time. But I do have a slide presentation that I would like to show you because nothing they have changed impacts that. So if I can come back at another time and.
Sure.
Because I'd
Yeah.
like to also talk about the TIF, actually.
Okay. Can you, do you have is your slide presentation
That's it.
loaded?
That's
Okay.
it. Are these
Okay,
both
you know
the
what?
same?
Now we need the lights down again.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, we got it.
Okay.
Thank you, whoever did that.
The corner of Main and Chicago may be vacant land, but it is not in the middle of nowhere. It is an established neighborhood. Businesses are located here. People are living here. The alley is where we coexist, and this is where C1A meets residential. And I'd like to show you what's going on that this development shares in the alley with other properties on the block. So that's 835. Nice, bright, open This is the alley at the northeast corner. That is going to be their stairwell enclosure adjacent to the lot line. It's going to be 40 feet long, 20 feet high. On the left-hand side are the dumpsters. I found out all those dumpsters serve the entire Evanshire building. They are not all Lucky Platter dumpsters. That serves all the property in that building. So you have 5 dumpsters, 4x6, 1 rollaway cart. That right there equals 30 feet plus a couple feet for the rollaway. Garbage is picked up 6 days a week. 1 tallow receptacle. So that's over 35 feet of garbage dumpsters right across the alley. There's the garbage truck. That's how much room there is on either side. The utility poles pretty much are adjacent to the lot line. It's hard to figure with snow underneath, and there's no markings on the driveway. So this is what happens when they pick up the garbage. So the
Nikki,
10-foot
is this looking northbound?
That is looking northbound, yes.
Okay.
The 10-foot setback, they said, that they are giving us is required by zoning law because that part of the alley is across from residential. The Lucky Platter building at the end is still C1A, so there is no mandatory 10-foot setback. And these are the kind of uses generated by Lucky Platter and others in that building. There are 2 very successful restaurants in this alley that use this alley, Lucky Platter and Campagnola. That is a giant Cisco semi that will be parked there. And other uses in the alley. Restaurants get food, beverages, restaurant supplies, linens, you name it. I took all these photographs in the week before the February 26th Plan Commission meeting. I did not stand outside looking for photo ops. It was bitterly cold that week. There was a lot of snow. All I did was have a camera in my pocket when I went outside. I didn't stage these. This is a week's worth of traffic in the alley. Again, that is looking north. Oh, and it's not just trucks and cars. There are pedestrians in the alley. That woman is cutting through that little space between the tallow receptacle and the truck. 3 pedestrians and a dog. A woman and a dog and a truck and a car. It is a very busy alley. This is further south in the alley. This gentleman has parked his car to make that delivery. A car has pulled up behind him. I switched to the other side. The car wants to go by, eventually comes very near to the edge of my garage, heads on down to the alley. More pedestrians, more trucks. There's a car down there. Here's another truck. FedEx, there are businesses in these buildings over here. They get FedEx deliveries. They get UPS deliveries. There are workmen in cars. Still looking south. Wine deliveries. This is my garage. Look at the truck there, the car there, the truck down at the other end of the alley. There goes the wine guy. And you'll see the garbage truck is waiting to come in the end of the alley. I love this one. A man on a bike, and look what's behind him. That pulls out. Car can move. Here's UPS. There's the garbage man picking up the garbage from the building across the alley from me. The garbage at the other end of the alley is blocking the entire way because there are 3 utility poles there that make it impossible for a car to pass the garbage truck. So that guy's blocking that end. This garbage truck is blocking this one, and someone comes out of 811 Chicago. Someone comes out of the building next to me, and they would both like to go out that way, but they can't. So this garbage truck backed up so those cars could get by him.
We have a question. Alderman Rainey.
I don't really have a question. I can see where there can be conflicts. I'm on an all-residential, single-family street, and we have conflicts in our alley. But this is why we have alleys, so that we can have deliveries and garbage pickup and, you know, garages off the residential and main streets. So what I'm seeing here really is some conflict, but, you know, patience is a virtue. And garbage pickup in the alley. I have a concern about the dumpsters being so full. If they're emptied 6 days a week, I think our community development department probably ought to look into that. But otherwise, there's snow that's keeping, that's not going to be year round. So I'm not seeing this as a real negative. I'm seeing.
Well, one of the, not to interrupt you, Alderman Rainey, but one of the things I've asked the staff to do is to do a sources and uses analysis of the alley, so we can find out, are some of these dumpsters supposed to be someplace else on this property?
Yeah.
And maybe the dumpsters near the Evanshire have come onto that west side because the lot has been vacant. It's
I've been there a long time.
right. So what I've asked the staff to do is to look at this alley and find out what are ways that through enforcement the city can improve how this alley works, and that might be that that there are issues here that have kind of gradually encroached on the alley and made it more difficult. But there's no question, this alley functions as everything: street, loading berth, alley, delivery area. We've had everything in this alley.
I know she said this was the week of February 26th, so it's a lot of snow out there, so I would imagine that they might have had problems with emptying the garbage that week.
Yeah.
So that's probably why they're feeling.
Possibly, yeah.
Unfortunately, the garbage looks like that most of the time.
Well, it shouldn't. That's very objectionable. That shouldn't be. I'm more concerned about the garbage than the traffic.
Yeah.
I think the city manager and the city staff are doing this analysis to figure out what else the city should do to make this alley work better, and will be getting back to us at the next meeting.
Okay. I guess just showing you what else was going on in the alley, to show you that at 835's end of the alley, there is no room, because the wall sits at the lot line, there is no room for anybody to pass a truck or anything else. This end of the alley, also the presidential, there is 120 units. This is the only exit, entrance, and loading dock area. Oh, and I'll save that for next time, because I want to address some comments made by the Plan Commission and show you the properties maybe and what surrounds 835 Chicago, and show you what parking they have. And but that kind of ties in to me wanting to use the correct information before I say anything else.
We understand.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The next person is Paige Riggs. Okay. Next is Michael McElwee. If you would come forward and state your name and your address.
Sure. I'm Mike McElwee. I live actually at 515 Main. Mm-hmm. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank everyone for the whole process. I like the presentation that you guys gave. I liked it 2 or 3 times that you've given it. And I think it overall would be useful to Evanston. The concern that I have seems to be the one that most people have, which is the parking. It seems that some assumptions are being made there with respect to, one, taking, I guess, credit for the fact that there happens to be an L line and a train line there, and which I understand that's pretty much what gives it its LEED Silver certification. You put any apartment there, if they did just a couple extra things, they suddenly get the LEED Silver, so to take credit for that is maybe a bit overstating, but from what I understand, there's 99 spots, and what the listing said is what we would normally expect per the permit for that is around 146, 150, something like that. So they're asking to kind of make up a shortfall of around 50 spots. And then on top of that, that makes, in their credit for the 100 spots that they're providing, it makes an assumption that the that the retail spots, that some of those are offered up as residential off hours. A couple questions there. One, if we go to the meter-based system, does that then prevent that from happening on those spots because they're now metered spots? They're not really one versus the other. And then the other question is, if some of those retail spots on the first floor are restaurants, stuff like that, they're open pretty late. So those people that work at those restaurants are going to continue to need those spots all day, which means those residential spots are not available for people. So that's one consideration. Another one, I was happy to hear that some concessions were made with the last town hall meeting as far as adding more parking. One thing that I found confusing there, so hopefully that could be addressed, is the opportunity for hydraulic spots is being provided as needed. What does that mean? Does that mean the hydraulics will be installed there, and then if people need that extra spot, it's there? Or does that mean people go ahead and permit the thing, and then once it's permitted, what's going to enforce them adding those extra hydraulic spots, quote unquote, as needed? Because I saw on the slide there was, I guess, a nice slide of other things that are under consideration for adding to the building. But again, once all the permitting is given for the building,
Well, that's
people are looking to make a buck, right? So, and I don't begrudge any businessman's opportunity to make $1 where he can. So if he's got a lot of things that he's considering that would cost him money, potentially, cost him making dollars, once the permit is in place and they don't have to do those, why would they do them?
Well, if that's the process that we're going through right now, to determine what it is we're going to require be done within the building.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, well, those are my chief concerns.
All right,
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Next is Carl Bova. And then after that, we have Esther Hargitay and Hee-Kyung Sung, and then Jin Ko.
Carl Bova, 1322 Rosalie Street. I live very close to a building that does not have any appreciable amount of parking. However, they do have off-street parking available to them across the street. They choose not to use it, and that's the photograph that you will see passing along. It's a quality of life issue whenever there's spillover. I'd like to open this discussion by indicating, sorry to the public, I've got about a 4-page series of notes that I put together related to the various subjects. I did attend the last Plan Commission meeting.
Carl, just in the interest of time, can we get you to give us some bullet points on your 4 pages?
Other people have been given the same opportunities.
Go right
and
ahead.
I'd like to
Go ahead.
I will take that into consideration for sure.
Thank you.
Portland and San Francisco are widely different from Evanston and cannot be compared to Evanston with respect to anything related to the use of automobiles. In addition, Evanston has about 45,000 cars, and it has had 45,000 cars for about the last 8 years. There has been no reduction in the number of cars in Evanston. No one is selling their cars. At most, people are going possibly from 2 cars to 1, but they're not going to 0. I hear a lot of zeros in the presentation today. The single greatest difference, for instance, between Evanston and Portland is Portland sits since 1973 in what's called an urban growth boundary. No development is allowed beyond the boundary of the county, and so that centralizes all the development, centralizes the employment, and therefore makes actual use of transit real. That's not true here. People continue to use their cars to get to work, and at best, if they're not using their cars, they're at home, they need to be stored somewhere off-site. An advocate and the city staff makes an assertion that 12% of Evansonians own 0 cars, and 66% own 0 or 1 car. Tonight I heard that figure has jumped up to 70%. When asked, the advocate did not know how many people owned 1 or 2 cars. Nor is staff telling you that. Well, I can tell you, based on the U.S. Census, there are 78% of Evanston households that own 1 or 2 cars. Do you think that there's going to be less than 1 car per unit? I don't think so. I'll skip over the second page. You could read it at your leisure. As for tandem and lift parking, they're ineffective. They're used only in the densest areas under adverse economic conditions. One is cited, I think, in several locations. Downtown Chicago, good example. Manhattan, another example. Not Evanston. They're simply not effective. In addition, the one that's cited here and included in the plans doesn't even work. It's not high enough to work. SUVs and ordinary sedans cannot fit in a 2-stall arrangement the way it's shown on the plans. Tandem spaces don't work either. My last page. A comparison of the number of cars per unit is not the measure of acceptance. At the Plan Commission meeting earlier, staff prepared a document that identified the number of bedrooms and the parking stalls provided. This document did not make it into your packet, nor has it ever been seen by the public. The problem is that the number of stalls per unit is not accurate with respect to how the development is or isn't meeting code. Code determines required parking stalls by assessing the number of bedrooms and stalls per bedroom, not the number of units. So it's logical that the 2 or 3 bedroom units, including in this development, which are fairly significant in number, are very, very likely to have 1 or more car. And the code recognizes this. Since this development does have a very high percentage of 2 or 3 bedroom units, it's even more likely that this development will be dreadfully insufficient with respect to on-site parking. Further, also not included in your packet is the fact that city-owned parking lots in this area are over capacity and have waiting lists. So spillover, as the photo may indicate, will occur. There will be definite adverse effects caused by that to the neighboring community. Staff's memo also includes a series of 8 comparative developments that seemingly support a finding of fewer stalls, as the applicant proposes, versus the need for more stalls, as I contend. The table contains 5 examples where the development is either close to a public garage, and therefore that consideration was made when those lesser numbers of parking stalls were permitted by the city. A 6th example Central Station has an agreement to use, I think, 30 stalls at Ryan Field. When you add those 30 stalls, that development does not have a 1-to-1 parking ratio. It has a 1.39 parking ratio. So 6 out of 8 do not meet that criteria. Yet they're purported to be all great examples of where you would have lesser need for parking. Is lesser need something that the city should be looking at? Yes, 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 absolutely. I think you're all tired of seeing the same old song and dance, looking at the code. The code overestimates the number of stalls, and that's a fact. It definitely does. But it doesn't do so to this drastically reduced effect. This is a dangerous situation. Staff itself identifies congestion as an issue, but it dismisses it as minor in light of I-Go cars and the TOD, which, by the way, TOD is not effective TOD in Evanston. Even though there have been 5,000 extra residents in the downtown area, it has not increased appreciably the amount of transit usage in the downtown station. It may work elsewhere, different circumstances, but it's not the same here. People do have cars, they use their cars, and they store their cars on their property.
Thank you.
With that, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Carl. Okay, the next person is
Esther Hargitay, 515 Main.
Yes.
Thank you for allowing us to comment. Thank you for the presentation. I didn't prepare comments, but I have some notes in response to the presentation that I would like you to consider as you consider the issues at hand. I would like to start with mentioning that the annual board meeting of 515 Main was exactly right now, and that's why there are actually very few of us present, but I think we represent the voice of more than those present here. So just a few things to consider as you look back at the presentation and the information shared. There was a little bit of cherry picking as to the information shared. For example, the slides did not include data about 515 Main, right? So we had a whole slide about buildings in the area and their parking allocation, and our building wasn't on it, even though we were one of the closest buildings, presumably because it wouldn't make the development proposed look very good in terms of their parking ratio. Also note that those slides did have some factual mistakes. For example, the Amelie building is directly across from an L station. It's not 2 blocks from transit. I found it interesting that the developers contracted with a company for a traffic study. What I found rather curious is that the slide that we were shown contained no data. So we were told lots of comments about how this isn't a problem and this is minimal and this isn't going to affect anything, but we weren't actually shown any numbers of that study. The person presenting that information also made judgment calls about how it's not going to be a problem, but didn't share what those judgment calls were based on. Clearly, these are subjective issues.
The city staff can provide you with the information, all of the data that was part of the applicant's planned unit development.
Okay, so it's great if those data exist. I found it surprising that in a presentation none of those data were presented, and we just got subjective comments of little and none and not a problem. That's not a factual data-based study as presented as such. The developers say that they've added more parking spots since the last meeting, but let's not forget that they're also removing 4. So let's keep that part of the statistics and the numbers. We saw mention of Northwestern Shuttle on several slides. As I don't speak for the university, but as an employee of the university, as someone who uses a shuttle on occasion, I'd like to mention that Northwestern is very specific about how those shuttles are not meant for commuters. Those shuttles already run at capacity. I recently wrote to the office to request that they actually increase the number of shuttles they have because they're so full already as is, and I was told these are not meant for commuters, so no change will be seen there. So I don't think including that as a viable option for people is reasonable. We heard helpful data from national statistics, but this is a very specific local issue. I don't think we heard any results from a study done of actual local residents. For example, if you surveyed the residents of 515 Main, you would probably find that while many of us do take the L, do take the Metro, some of us take the shuttle and walk, we nonetheless own cars and we use our parking spots, and those are very important. So those are my comments about the presentation. And just one more thing, I think out of respect to residents who'd like to comment, if you're going to limit our time or ask that we limit our time in comments, I think in future meetings you should limit the time that the development presenters get.
Understood. Thank you. Next is Hee Kyung Sung.
Do you need this copies?
Oh. Okay. And this is your presentation?
Yes.
And if you have copies, we'll take copies too, if you
Okay.
have it. They can be. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hee Kyung Sung. I live in 1211, and my girlfriend live in 515 Main Street. I'm an architect and also I'm lead professional. Since this building was proposed in February, I did some researches as I attending this Plan Commission meeting. Okay, I will start. 535 Chicago Avenue is located in C1A zoning.
Cindy, could you get the lights, please? I'm sorry. There. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, C1A zoning area. As far as I know, C1A, that area is the only area with the C1A zoning code. Like the other area, there's no C1A. It's along the Chicago Avenue from Lee Street to down South Boulevard. And that one of the parking expert mentioned that quarter mile as a TOD area. So I measured a quarter mile circle from the Purple Line station. It includes 900 Chicago Avenue, 515 Main Street, also our 835 Chicago, also Omni south of Ketch Avenue. And as you see that Main Street is only 21 feet wide. If you exclude the street parking, it's very narrow street, 1A street, not 1A, but 1 lane street. And the alley is only 20 feet. This is the side photos. Here's the, on the left side, left down side, there's an alley from Main Street view. It shows the, we already mentioned about the garages and the fire hydrants, such things there. And there's a 7-story, 900 Chicago Avenue building, which is completed 2005. and 515 Main Street, which is 9-story building, but also it's 97 feet high to the top of the bottom of the top floor ceiling. So actually, it's not 105; it's 97 feet. I want to correct that. I measured it by myself. And this is the Omni south of Ketchi. It's completed in 2013. It has 18 feet wide sidewalk along the Chicago Avenue. Also, it has open space building plaza on the corner, approximately 3,500 square feet. I did a zoning analysis for the project. So this is a C1A plan development. So maximum allowed is 87 units, but they are asking 112 units. It's 29% over the C1A zoning allow, but that's within the PD allowable. Also, FAR is the gross inhabitable area divided by lot line, which is the maximum C1A requirement is the 4.0. They're asking a little bit more than 4.8, and they're asking height 97 feet. That's the maximum allowable in PD. They are increasing 30 feet. Also, we mentioned about the parking. Total required parking is 223 spaces, 156 spaces for residential. There are, as you see, there are about 49 one-bedroom, 42 two-bedroom, and 7 three-bedroom. So it's a quite huge units there also. Also, for retail, there are minimum requirement is 35 square spaces, but they are providing only 13 spaces. For residential, they are providing 74 on the ground and 15 on the 74 underground, 15 in the first floor. They are saying they can increase by tandem, also by lifting parking, but those are not legal parking. They are only providing 104 legal parking spaces. And the most problematic is the office. You have to provide 32 minimum spaces for office, but they are not providing none. So when you add those up, they are only providing 47% of required total parking spaces. Yeah, they can say they are providing all the parking to the residential, but how about the office and the retail? That's the setback. I did a setback. I asked the developer about the setback. There will be no setback from the Main Street alley entry from Main Street for 50 feet, but after that they will provide the 10 feet required setback, as one of the citizens mentioned. That's required. And another problem is that they are not providing any setback for the interior side abutting building. What's the two-story restaurant south side? They have to provide the 5-foot setback, but they are not providing any setback. So as I did some research about the surrounding buildings, I found meeting minutes in 2008, December 8, by this building planning and development committee. It's about the Omni, which is within the neighborhood. They mentioned that it's a great transit-oriented rental development. And here, there's 214 units. They are about the 4,008 square feet retail. There's no office. They are providing 312 parking spaces. And also here you mentioned originally it was proposed as 280 units, but it was reduced to 214 units due to the feedback from the neighbors. That's what I found in city's meeting minutes. So I did some chart, a chart comparing, as a developer mentioned about the 1717 Leach, those actually those buildings doesn't have any retail or office. It's only residential only. Also, it's a different zoning area, so it's irrelevant to compare this 835 Chicago Avenue with those buildings. So I only compare that 3 buildings within that area, C1A zoning, recently built. Omni building has its lot area is about 80,000 square feet, and it is 5-story high, and its FAR is 3.8, according to your meeting minutes. And they are providing, there are only about 8,000 square feet retail. They are providing 18 parking spaces per retail and 294 parkings per 214 residential units. It's almost 1.3, around 1.3. I didn't calculate. And 515 Main Street has about the same size as the 835 Chicago Avenue. It's about 30,000 square feet. Its height is 97 feet. But its FAR, so building area itself, is very low. It's only about 3.6. And there are 36 units and 7,300 square feet retail area, no office. But they provide the 70 spaces per resident and 20 spaces per retail. And 900 Chicago Avenue, it was built in 2005. It's a 7-story high. I didn't have a chance to get that information about the FAR or the actual division of the parking space, but there is 76 units and there are 140 parking spaces. So one of the developer of that building lives in 515 Main. He mentioned that he provided more than required parking. So when I look at those, I think the reason of the problem is the high FAR, because there are so many units in the small lot area. It causes a parking problem. It causes a setback problem. So I think they should lower those. Then I think a lot of problems will go away. And so I'm working with a developer in Chicago. They propose 11-story building, but according to their comments of the neighbor, they are lowering that building to 10-story building. So why they cannot do here? So I think that's my question, also my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Our last speaker is it Jin Ko?
Hello, my name is Jin Ko. I live in 515 Main Street. And I attended last 2 planned commission meetings, and I understand that this building the presentation that they made today is based on the fact that it's going to be a rental property for now, but we understand that it's going to turn into condos eventually when the time comes. And that will add more serious problems because it's going to change demographics. And as Scott said on his presentation, the car ownership is significantly higher among homeowners compared to renters. So regardless, the proximity to public transit. And I mean, this will create even more problems. We already have existing problems with parking now, but it's going to add more problems. And I'd like to know, I mean, and we are the ones, I mean, developers, they build up the building and they go, and most of them don't live in the area, but we are the ones who are going to live with the consequences, negative, permanent consequences. So I'd like to address that because none of us really brought this up about this building turning into condominium eventually.
Thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, I do apologize. I had skipped down. Go ahead. Are you Charles Portis? Okay. All right. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. I misread your number.
Sorry. My name's Charlie Portis. I live at 1212 Lakeshore Boulevard, and I just wanted to speak a little bit to the office space in the project. I have been in the commercial real estate field for over 25 years, lived in Evanston for about 4 years. And I'm a senior vice president at JF McKinney & Associates. And there I've been involved in about over 500,000 square feet of new speculative office development in the last 15 years in the north and northwest suburbs. And I just like to say I think it's the office portion is a really welcome addition, especially with the transit. You know, there's not a lot of office space being proposed right now. I think it's about 13 or 14,000 square feet. I think it's going to do very well. You've got both the L and the Metra, which is very attractive in terms of getting people to the space. A lot of times when people are looking to move to the suburbs, one of the big challenges is how can I attract that workforce that lives near the Red Line or wants to take the Metra? It's very difficult in the suburbs. Most of the downtowns like the Highland Parks and Glencos, there's no office space, and if you go to where the office space is, there's no Metro stop. So I think from a transit standpoint, it checks the box. It also checks the box in terms of area amenities. You know, you've got a Starbucks and you've got Brothers K and you've got the new Hoosier Mama and Lucky Platter and a place like the Alcove. It's a vibrant environment. There's a place to get food. Again, it's going to attract people that want to bring their business, whether they live in Evanston or they like Evanston, and they can bring the workforce in that they need. The amenity center on the second floor, that's what all the top downtown buildings are doing right now. And again, Evanston, we're a suburb, but we also have a lot of urban characteristics, and I think that amenity center will be very appealing. So I know it's talked about as an incubator space. I think that's a great use, but I could also see just your kind of regular vanilla office user really gravitating to this space. The Evanston office market is very vibrant relative to other communities. You know, office has struggled. As I said, my firm, we've done a lot of spec space in the last 15 years relative to other people. There hasn't been much done, but I think if this is allowed to go forward, I think the office space is going to get a great reception, and it opens the possibility for more office space in this area. I don't have any projects in mind or buildings in mind, but I think this can prove the viability of this use, which creates a lot of economic development, and I hope that it goes forward, and I think everyone will be pleasantly surprised at how quickly this office space leases up.
Thank you very much. That concludes all of our comments. Would we like to discuss? I think that there have been a number of issues that have been raised that are obviously going to require a second meeting on this. And given the time, what we could do is just decide to hold this in committee.
I think that's the best thing to do.
All right. Why don't we hold this in committee until the next P&D meeting? I would like to make note is during the spring breaks of our two school districts, and I, for one, will not be present. I have a feeling several other members might not be present at that next meeting. So I think that we should probably have this come forward on the 28th, April 28th, because then we'll have a full complement of the city council members here. All right? Okay. Alderman Rainey, did you have your light on?
I did. I don't think what I had to say is really relevant at this point, given what you've just said. So what we're going to do is, this is going to take a month and a half versus 2 meetings, right? I mean, I don't see, are you thinking of suspending the rules at the next Planning and Development meeting for this project?
To make
I hadn't given it thought yet at this point. I want to hear what comes back at the next meeting.
I would like to, the reason my light is on is because my intention was to move introduction. And I would hope that the committee would approve moving introduction and then holding it and sending it back to committee.
I think that's a good idea.
So that at least it takes that step.
Right.
Okay. Anybody? I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
So we would
Right, so I did.
move introduction and refer it, to move introduction and then hold it, but refer it back to committee.
Refer it back to committee.
Okay. All right. Yeah, but referring back. Okay. All right. With that, we have no more items.
To vote?
Oh, yes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So it will be introduced at the council but referred back to the committee for the meeting of April 28th. Okay? That concludes our agenda tonight for P&D. Do I have a motion to adjourn? All right. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned, and the council meeting will start in a few minutes. Thank you.